You're listening to The Rob and Tristan Show. Today's episode is brought to you by RefBox. RefBox, keeping your kids in bounds. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I actually have my regular co-host Rob with me, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a different episode and talking about some of Rob's background and more specifically his time at Google. We do get a lot of questions about that and wanted to try to answer them here now. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Doing very good, yep.
So I'm going to basically treat you like any of our other experts that we bring on the show and ask you some of our basic questions and dive into some of the more detailed ones later. So let's just start with those that may not know you or some of your background. Just tell us a bit about yourself and some of your work experience.
So I'm a digital marketing expert. I've been in the business for going over 15 years. Highlights of that include working for Yellow Pages as both their senior strategist and manager of analytics, moving on to Google, where I was one of 4 judges for the Google Search Excellence Awards in 2014. While I was at Google, I helped create auditing systems to look at the work of agencies to try to ensure they were actually managing their clients' accounts correctly from an advertising standpoint. And then currently I'm a director for performance at Direct Access Digital out of Burlington. And coincidentally, we've recently just won the 2015 Google Search Excellence Award, which is it's a pretty big deal as far as that goes. But that's enough of me.
Okay. Well, the whole show is going to be about you, so you're going to have to get used to that. All right. So the Google Search Award that you were just awarded for 2015, I had never heard of that, actually. And I believe that your team are the only ones that hold that in North America, right? So Google ranks you guys as the number one agency for that year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually a very complicated process of making a determination of who should win. They go through a lot of different things that I'm sure I'm not actually supposed to talk about to make the determination, but winning it is a big deal. It means you've been scrutinized by the best of the best. And out of all of these, I think it's something like 16,000 advertising agencies in North America, they decided that you were the one serving your client the best. So it's a pretty big deal. And Eric at the company there is a really hardworking guy in that. So it's great to see him and the team, get the award.
Yeah, well, congratulations. Let's go back to your time at Google, because I think you get a lot of questions about that. Certainly, we've seen questions come in about it. And let's just start with the basics. And how did you get started with Google, and how did you get your foot in the door there?
So I was running, as you know, I was running a digital agency of my own. I just happened to be sitting around one day when my phone rang. I didn't know the number, but against what I normally do, I picked it up and said hello. And this kind of shady voice on the other end was like, "Hi, is this Rob?" And I said, "Yeah." Anyway, we got along through a conversation quick, and then he asked me what I thought of Google. I was like, "Well," I said, "with everything that I do, I guess Google's kind of my enemy." And then he was like, "Oh, well, that's kind of awkward because I'm calling on behalf of Google." I quickly bit my lip and I went, whoa, let me explain that. I said, if you and I are both having to use the same Google platform, then the platform is my enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Google itself is my friend, but their platform is my enemy. And he was like,
nice save.
He's like, yeah, good save. He even agreed on the phone, and they asked me to come in for an interview. So I said yes. I've actually, Google was life-changing for me. I came from almost nothing, and until I found Google, my wife and I were living in a little box with kids, and I was struggling in law enforcement and a number of things. And so the opportunity to actually go to Google and to experience firsthand this company that had actually changed my own life, it was too much to pass up. It was funny, I actually put a lot of stuff on hold and made a lot of people nervous just so that I could go experience Google for a year. But so I got there, and the interview process was pretty intense. They brought in 3 different experts to sit there and grill me, but I had a lot of interesting answers, I think, which stood out. Like, for one thing, they asked me, where do you see yourself down the road, blah, blah, blah. And I told them that I only intend to stay with them for 12 months. And they thought that was an odd thing because nobody says that. If you got a job at Google, you keep your job at Google. Who the heck wouldn't want to work at Google? But that kind of profound statement, I guess, stuck in their head. And so it came to be that in 2014, I walked in the door as an official contractor for Google, but I was there to teach Google how to Google, and that felt pretty good.
Some of these larger tech companies have a legend, if you will, about their interview and their interview process. How did you find that interview process?
The first person they sent in to me was a technical analyst named Tony, He's an awesome guy, but at the time he looked like a cold dude. He came in and he sat down, and there was a little screen on the table that had names on it, and I came to know that it was like a digital calendar they kept in all meeting rooms. But to me, it seemed intimidating. It seemed like a computer monitor that was just warning me that the next guy's coming, and now the next guy's coming. And he just started coming at me, asking me technical questions about the AdWords platform. But that was the easiest part of the interview for me because that's what I know in and out. There was a lot of interesting questions. I know the third guy that interviewed me had pointed out that I don't have a PhD. I was like, that's right. And he said, are you concerned having to work in an environment full of PhDs? Is that going to be intimidating for you? I just kind of laughed and pointed out that I'd been kicking the butts of everybody else who had a PhD for the last 15 years. Why was I going to let this suddenly stop me? He had a good laugh with that. And I felt like when I left there that I'd already gotten the job. I think I'd won them over pretty quickly, but it was a good process. It is a hard interview, though. I've had other people a lot of friends who've tried to go and get the job, and they can't get past the interview. And they're, in some cases, I would say possibly better than I am. But just they crack under the pressure. So it's not an easy interview process.
Yeah, I imagine. So you did obviously get a job offer and started working for them. Tell us a little bit about what your first impressions were when you started working there.
I went to the Google office in Toronto. And when I first walked in, the very first thing I noticed is that everybody was 2% body fat and beautiful. And I thought, well, great, here I am. I look like Shrek. This is going to be fun. I stand out right away. But the positivity and the energy there was incredible. Everybody was just, it was all joy and happiness. And I would later learn that because there's coffee on every floor within quick reach, that it was really actually just simulated joy and happiness from too much coffee. But it works. They're a very high energy group, and the speed these people work at is just crazy. So they're very high functioning. The other thing too is when you actually get into the building and get up the elevator and get to the lobby itself is a little intimidating. It's got all of this really interesting furniture in it, but it's also got this giant digital display, and it's got an orb, and it's their version or satellite version of Google Maps where you can actually spin the ball and go and look at the pyramids and do all these things. And so they do a really good job with your initial presentation of looking like a giant tech company. And then, the entire building's been designed almost to just blow your mind. That's how they work. So, and I think that's mainly because when they bring in someone they want to hire, they want that person to walk through the building and go, man, this place is awesome.
The average person, a lot of people know what Google are. A lot of people will say the answer to their problem is just to Google it. But there's obviously a lot of kind of magic behind the scenes, a mystery, if you will. So it's interesting to talk to somebody and say, hey, you actually worked at Google. I'm curious, what is the number one question people ask you about your time at Google?
Believe it or not, the question I get asked the most is there actually an ice cream floor? Yeah. People have heard that.
And is there in fact an ice cream floor?
There's an ice cream floor, yeah. It's There's let me think, there's floors 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, and 16. So floor 16 is the ice cream floor, and that you go up there and they've got a freezer and a fridge just loaded with like Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's, and they've got an actual soft serve machine there. So you can go up there anytime you want and just make yourself an ice cream cone or grab a bucket of Ben & Jerry's and head back to your desk. Each of the floors has a theme. I'm not sure I got them all straight in my head anymore, but the 15th floor was like, I knew that if I wanted pepperettes and nuts and things like that I went to the 15th floor. 14th floor was the actual sort of a restaurant cafeteria area. And that was great because you'd go in there and the chefs would cook food for you right on the fly. They also had this magical creation called Google Bacon, which was some sort of marinated, honey glazed maple syrup type of bacon. And it was possibly the greatest thing I've ever had. And likely in all the attempts I was having at trying to lose weight at that time, I'm pretty sure the Google Bacon was not helping me. Outside of the restaurant portion, they actually have a balcony. It's about 14 floors up from the downtown Toronto area. And up there's actually a mini golf course. So you can go sit out there and eat, or you can play mini golf around the building. So it was pretty cool. 15th floor is also the famous hidden room. They have a room behind a bookcase. So you go up and you grab the one book and it opens and there's a fireplace, big chairs and everything. And you can disappear in there and read. It's pretty nice. Instead of trying to name off floors, I'll just name the highlights. They have like ping pong room and games room there. They had a DJ room, which had 2 turntables in it, and a microphone. And so you'd be able to actually go in there and play around with records if you wanted. There was a music room, like a studio setup. I used to go up there a lot and play some bass or guitar. And probably one of the big ones was the ping pong area. I guess I'll mention that. It was very popular to Googlers. The engineers there just love ping pong. So, yeah, I don't know. I could go on a long time about it. There's an awful lot in the building there, but they certainly make a very good impression on you when you first get in.
Yeah, it sounds like it. If the 16th floor is in fact correct and it has the ice cream floor on it, and that's the number one question you asked, hopefully we should give them a heads up and they can step up security on that floor thanks to your disclosure there. Amongst all the ping pong and the food and things like that, you obviously had to do some work. So what was it like to actually do that work? What was the team atmosphere, the culture, when you were actually at your desk or wherever it was that you performed your work?
Sure, yeah. I actually got to work with 2 sectors. They were broken into sectors, or what we call verticals. One would be retail, and of course a retail division would oversee companies like, say, a Walmart or a Disney or so on. And then the other sector was the tech sector, and so they oversaw companies like LG or Microsoft or Apple. And so what I was doing there was coming in to audit the accounts and then work with the account executives and the account managers to make sure they were familiar with AdWords best practices. I did a lot of troubleshooting there as well. But as far as the team dynamic, it was funny because the teams would all give themselves their own names. So the team that I first joined was called the Honey Badgers. And we had all these stuffed honey badgers that made a lot of funny noises that sat at the edges of our desks. So they kind of treated it more like a team sports atmosphere. And a lot of that was because the job of an account executive was to encourage their clients to increase the revenue, which meant encouraging people to spend more on advertising. So like with any good sales program, they had a way of, the manager would be high energy and slapping his hands and playing music and making a lot of noise, and everybody be hooting and hollering and laughing and joking. And it sounds good, but that was how they kept the people who needed to be doing the talking excited. The rest of us who were just trying to get some work done would usually throw on some headphones.
Okay. I can imagine that'd be a bit distracting. We've been talking with Rob Case and his time at Google. We're going to take a quick break and mention our sponsor, RefBox. And when we come back, we'll continue talking about Rob's background and his time at Google.
Protect your children from the dangerous side of the internet. Introducing the RefBox. The RefBox filters all devices connected to your home network, tablets, Macs, PCs, and more. And there's no software installation needed. Simply plug in the box and your family is protected against adult content, extreme violence, and dangerous phishing sites. Learn more by visiting refbox.ca. That's REF, refbox.ca. RefBox. Keep your kids in bounds.
So Rob, we talked a lot about kind of the fun highlights at Google. Talked about the ice cream floor and what it was like to kind of work there and the culture. But you were only there for 12 months, and that was deliberate. You knew that going in, that you only wanted to be there for 12 months. In your time there, what was one of the most meaningful things that had happened?
So for me, a lot of it was just that they were very supportive. So while I was there, I was very inspired. I mean, it's hard not to be inspired when you're around a bunch of people who are so high energy, so in shape. One of the first people I met there was a lady named Brianne, and Brianne was a bodybuilder. So try meeting like a beautiful bodybuilder who's intelligent and not feel incredibly motivated to like, man, I need to hit the gym. So there was a lot of things like that. So what ended up happening was, as I kind of got in there, I really started to feel self-conscious about my weight and my health. So I think the most meaningful thing that came from there was not only the drive they gave me to try to do something about it, but then the support they gave me when I finally did.
We're on the radio, so people can't tell, and if people don't know you, I mean, you are a bigger guy, right? And you have tried a number of times to lose weight, and one of those times was at Google, and so you had said they were very supportive of that. Can you give me an example of, or how was that? I mean, it's interesting that a work atmosphere would be supportive of that, I think.
So in one ways, it's just by example. I mean, you're just looking around, and everybody's so full of energy and so youthful, and you're kind of sitting there like, maybe I don't need to eat this chicken wing. Maybe there's something else I could do here. So it actually kind of triggered in my head that, I need to do something. I'm definitely too large for my size, and I want to stick around for my family. So being there kind of got me thinking, and that's when I actually stumbled on the documentary Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead that had been put together by this Joe Cross. And then when I watched the movie, I was so inspired by what I saw happen to him and the people in the movie that became my journey into the juicing world at that time.
Okay, so you took a diet that was the juicing diet, is that right?
Yeah, so I decided that I was going to do a 60-day fast. So I let everybody at Google know that I was going for it. And I don't think anyone necessarily believed me, maybe because they'd seen me go back to the cafeteria a few too many times with plates, but I don't think they thought I was going to be able to. They're like, what, you're going to switch to kale juice? But I was pretty determined. I wanted it. So I got started. Sure enough, the first couple of days was a little rough, but a couple of days in, I started to feel a little better. Some of the problems was obviously withdrawing from caffeine, not being able to drink coffee. So one of the girls there named Liz had come up with the idea to send out a spreadsheet that was a pledge sheet. So she basically said, for every day that Rob stays on the juice, are you willing to donate a certain amount? So all these people were willing to donate a quarter or $1, or in some cases $6, depending, per day for every day that I could stay juicing. So, and then the agreement was that it would go to my favorite charity, and I chose the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. So the motivation that came from knowing like I could eat this hot dog or I could potentially help some kid in Toronto made it really easy to just not eat the hot dog. And that was a huge thing they did for me. So I pushed through the first 30 days and people could see like my clothes had all become loose. I dropped close to 54 pounds in the first 30 days. And I was getting a lot of positive feedback on it. But what I didn't expect was they had actually put together a little surprise for me. Google has this thing called the All Hands meeting. They happen every week, and contractors are actually not allowed to attend them. So I was sitting down at my desk, as I usually do during the meetings working, and I suddenly got told by my boss's assistant, a really nice lady named Vera, that I need to come upstairs. And I thought, why would I need to go upstairs? But I was like, okay, I'll be right up. So I went up in the elevator up to where the big meeting room was, and I came walking in, and it was just piled full of people. And the CEO was actually standing up on the stage talking, and they had all these TVs around where, they could potentially pipe in all these different people from all the other Googles. So I looked around and I saw where my boss was. So I kind of went and sat over by him. And for some reason, I was sitting there fully expecting to, get in trouble. Like I didn't understand what I did, but, why else would I have been called to this meeting I'm not allowed to be in? Yeah. I thought they were about to make an example of me, and I'm trying to think through my head, what did I do? So I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I see them call Liz up. And of course, Liz is the one that had started the spreadsheet. I didn't know what was going on, but then she stood up at the microphone and she said, so this all started with a documentary called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And suddenly they had a picture of me up on the screen, and it was I got my wife to take a picture of me holding up the pants that I'd been wearing just 30 days before, which now looked ridiculous in front of me. And they had gotten the picture off my Facebook and put it up. And she started to explain about what exactly it was I was going through, what it was I was drinking every day, and how I had actually motivated many, many other people in the office to actually do it too. So it was really moving. But then they asked me to come up. So I got up to the front, and the CEO let me know that they had something for me to watch. And so they had me turn and face this big screen on the wall. And then Joe Cross, the guy who made the movie, said, "Hi, Rob." I was like, wow. And he goes, I heard what you're doing. I heard you're doing some great work. I heard you're raising money for sick kids. And I heard you're sticking to the juice. And he's like, Joe's Australian. So he's like, good for you, mate. Blah, blah, blah. And I was just in shock. And then the video took about 2 minutes for him to finish what he was saying. And then they turned off the video. And when I turned around, everybody in the audience was standing there holding a wine glass. And I recognized right away that inside it was this juice called Mean Green Juice, which is the worst juice ever. It's like kale and celery and spinach, but it glows it's almost like a glowing green color. And it was beautiful to see all these cups raised. And right away, probably the first time in public that I'm willing to admit, I think I cried a little bit. But I held my face, just my eyes started to sweat. And they all held it up to me and said, cheers. And then I watched with a lot of joy as they all took a giant swig of the juice. If you could have seen the grimaces I saw from one side of the room to the other, it was a thing of beauty for sure. I was like, now they all know my pain. And it was funny because afterwards, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, how are you drinking this stuff? But then they all put their glasses down, and I got a round of applause for about 2 minutes. And then I thought it was over. And as I started to walk away, and I knew I'd better leave this room, I'm not actually supposed to be in here, and they'd just done this for me, the CEO had said, how much money have we raised so far? And so Liz had pointed out that at that point we were up to approximately $2,560. And he said, well, okay, then I'm going to pledge $1,000 myself, and I encourage all the other managers to pledge $1,000. and which was astonishing. So for the next 30 days, I stuck to it. By the end, I'd lost a total of 84 pounds. 82 to 84 pounds. I felt amazing. Like when you're doing the juice, it completely changed my cognitive function. My personal energy was through the roof. It was great. In hindsight, I wish I'd stayed with it. And then when the sheet finally came together, we realized that we had raised over $12,000 grand total. I hope I got that number right. If not, I'm sure Liz could correct me later. But yeah, so we'd raised roughly $12,000, which was all sent in my name to the Sick Kids Hospital. So not only was I, pretty happy with achieving the goal and then all of the incredible, inspiring encouragement I was given by the folks at Google, but on top of that, knowing that my discipline through that 60-day period had actually led to, say, a family getting to stay in Toronto for an extra couple of nights with their kid or something. It was just a wonderful feeling. So if I got to pick meaningful, I'd say that was possibly one of the more incredible moments of my entire life outside of anything. So that would be the one.
There's lots of these incredible kind of stories that come out of Google, and it's great to kind of know somebody that was on the inside and had experienced that. So here you are just thinking you want to better your life based off the culture that they had around them, around having healthier people, right? And how that kind of morphed into everybody rallying to support you and then ultimately benefiting a great charity. That's quite amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover about your time at Google? I mean, I can't imagine that you have many stories that can top the Sick Kids Hospital, but just want to make sure we cover everything. I mean, there's a lot of this mystery behind this search bar that people get. And I know Google's been hitting the news recently with their recent parent company, Alphabet, and things like that. So I wanted to kind of get a chance to kind of tell your experience and answer some questions that you get asked on a regular basis that you can finally just point to the show and say, I've already answered those questions. But there's nothing else you wanted to cover?
No, I guess the roundup on it is like every other company, Google itself is a company. It's got a revenue mandate and it's looking to grow and progress as well. But I know one thing is because of our locale. So there's 2 Google buildings in Southern Ontario. There's one in the Waterloo area, and then there's one in Toronto. And people are always asking me, what's the difference between those 2 buildings? So I'm going to lay it down, pretty much unknown to most people, but the Waterloo building is the home of the engineers. A long time ago, Google figured out that they need to keep marketing people away from the engineers and vice versa. And if you've ever tried to work in a situation that involves 2 of them together, it always goes bad. There's always a fight. So they just learn to keep them separate. So when you go to the one at Waterloo, what you see is mostly a bunch of guys who look like they fell out of bed, left their mom's basement, shook their hair out, and walked into work in their hockey jersey. And that's your engineers. They're the guys that are the programmers. They're the guys that make the engine run. If you go to Google Toronto, on the other hand, those are like your fashion models. Like everybody there is just beautiful, but that's because they're the marketing team and the sales team. So their focus is not on doing the program, and their focus is all about helping clients, going to meetings, hosting parties, and doing things like that. So Waterloo is kind of the workhorse, but Toronto's the breadwinner.
All right, we've been talking to my co-host Rob and some of his background as a marketing expert and his 12 months at Google and some of his experiences there, starting from a floor dedicated just to serving ice cream to Googlers, right up to a pretty motivational weight loss program where Sick Kids Hospital gets to benefit. So that was pretty great. Thanks, Rob, for sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Hopefully the listeners do get to enjoy some of the content you put forward there. You've been listening to The Rob and Tristan Show. Today's episode's been brought to you by RefBox. RefBox, keeping your kids in bounds. Hope everybody has a good day.